Have you ever found yourself studying well past the healthy limit, like sleeping at your desk unhealthy, but still not getting the grades you want, and looking at some of your classmates who appear to be doing great with much less stress? Well, you're definitely not alone, and chances are this isn't because you're not smart enough or work hard enough to be a great student. You may just not be working the right way. What's up, YouTube? If you're new here, my name is J.R. Smith. I'm a medical student at the Mayo Clinic, and in this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 most common study mistakes that students make. As always, you can find timestamps in the description below, but let's get straight into it with number 1, passive learning. Passive learning is a method of learning where students receive information from a professor or a textbook, and the goal is simply to absorb that material, compared to active learning, which requires a student to engage and interact with the material they are learning. We can get more insight into this if we look into the research by the National Training Laboratories in Maine, which examined how different methods of learning affect retention. They looked at the following modes of learning from lowest rates of retention to highest rates of retention, with lecture at 5%, reading at 10%, audio-visual at 20%, so things like watching videos or listening to podcasts, demonstrations at 30%, group discussions at 50%, practice by doing at 75%, and teaching others at a whopping 90% retention. And as you may expect, the modes of learning with the lowest rates of retention were defined as passive learning, and the ones with the highest rates of retention were deemed active learning. So if you're spending considerable time watching lectures or reading from a textbook, it can be that much more harder to remember the things that you're learning. That's not to say that lectures and reading have no place in education, but one of the biggest mistakes that students make is that they make these things the foundation of their studying instead of things that support their active learning. Now, the second mistake that students make is the cram and dump study method. We've all experienced just going through the motions for 90% of a class, and then the week before the exam, we turn our studying into overdrive and cram as much as we can to get the most out of a single day of performance. And sometimes we can even feel rewarded by this method because we end up getting the score on the exam that we wanted. But really, we're ultimately doing ourselves a disservice because our brain needs time to process material. And when we're going from 0 to 100, we'll ultimately fall right back down to 0, and we'll lose all of that material that we spent so much time studying. So we're really not even learning in this case, and we're just relying on temporary memorization to survive an exam. And one of the most unfortunate things with this approach is if you feel like it leads to success, then you'll end up doing it over and over again, and sooner or later this will be a habit. And over time, you'll find that instead of developing retained knowledge, you've only developed test anxiety, and now you have a bad relationship with learning. Learning is a marathon. Slow and steady wins the race, and you'll find that over time, as you're retaining the things that you're learning new things actually becomes even easier. This is greatly explained by Anders Ericsson in his book Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, where he says, consider what happens when you test a group of subjects by having them read a newspaper article on something a bit specialized, say a football or baseball game, and then quiz them to see how much they remember. Studies have shown that the key factor determining a person's comprehension of a story about a football or baseball game is how much that person already understands about the sport. The reason is straightforward. If you don't know much about the sport, then all of the details you are reading are essentially just a bunch of unrelated facts, and remembering them is not much easier than remembering a list of random words. But if you understand the sport, you've already established a mental structure for making sense of it, organized the information, and combined it with other relevant information you've already assimilated. The new information becomes part of an ongoing story, and as such, it moves quickly and easily into your long-term memory, allowing you to remember far more of the information in the article than you could have if you were unfamiliar with the game it describes. The more you study a subject, the more detailed your mental representation of it becomes, and the better you can get at assimilating new information. So take the time to learn rather than cram, and you'll find that learning new things actually becomes easier and easier over time. The third mistake that students make is studying without structure. Having an unstructured approach to studying means that you may be studying topics at random, not necessarily seeing how they connect, which makes it even harder to understand the individual concepts that you're learning. When you approach studying by first knowing the bigger picture and then systematically working your way down to understand the material in a more detailed way, you'll have a better understanding of the bigger picture and know how each detail fits into the overall scheme. I've definitely found myself reviewing material and not even knowing how the things that I'm learning fits into the overall topic that I'm trying to learn, and I know I can't be the only one here. Now, it does take quite a bit of organization to achieve a structured form of studying, but I have found a resource that makes this easier than ever, and this brings me to the wonderful sponsors of today's video, Traverse. If the organization powerhouse tool Notion had a baby with the tried and true study resource Anki, that baby would be Traverse. And yes, it is as good as it sounds. Traverse uses beautiful mind maps where you can easily visualize how topics connect with one another, so you never fall into the pitfall of unstructured studying. The tool separates the screen into your mind map and a place for your notes, where you won't only be able to have all your notes beautifully organized, but where you can actually turn each note into a flashcard the same way you would for Anki. But this is where Traverse will really blow your mind. For all my Ankiers out there, you can actually upload your Anki decks directly into Traverse. And this makes it so that you can still have the benefit of being able to still review those same cards in a new, organized and structured way. So not only are you incorporating structure into your studying, but you're basing your studying in active learning. And they even have a cool built-in Pomodoro feature, which you will see is another tool that will help you avoid the fourth mistake that many students make. Traverse provides a solution for essentially all of the study mistakes that we've talked about in one way or another. So if you're interested in this incredible resource, make sure you check out the link in the description below, and you can get a free 30-day trial. But let's move on to the fourth study mistake that most students make, and I've hinted at this before, and that is burning out. To avoid burnout, it is critical that you take breaks. Whether you alternate between 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest, like the Pomodoro cycles that were previously discussed, or take complete days off. By doing this, you'll be adding fuel to your gas tank, which is necessary to complete the future work that you need to do. Now, rest is hard for a lot of us because as students, we feel like if we aren't working, we're not being productive. And then we feel so bad about the fact that we're resting that we can't even rest peacefully, which kind of defeats the purpose. This is why I think the best students schedule time for the rest, because if it's on the schedule or made a part of the to-do list, you still feel productive by doing it. And in all reality, it's one of the most productive things that we can do. Sometimes we just have to trick our mind into believing so. And the way that you specifically prevent burnout will depend on what you find recharges your batteries best, whether that's hanging out with friends and family or just binge watching Netflix. There is no right or wrong way to fill your cup. The mistake that students make is just choosing not to fill it at all. Now, the final study pitfall that many students make is comparison. If you base either the way you study or the outcomes of your studying on the people around you, you will eventually fall victim to imposter syndrome. Your success will look different than anyone else's, so determine the goals that you have for yourself, put your blinders on, and pursue that without any concern of the goals of your peers. It can be very easy to want to compare your grades or your scores on your exams with your peers, but this will just leave you feeling stressed out and anxious and unrightfully feeling unsuccessful. It's extremely hard to learn when you're feeling things like imposter syndrome because your brain will spend its energy on comparison rather than learning. So if you start to feel yourself getting upset at others' success or defining your own success based on how it relates to your peers, take a moment to step back, reassess your personal goals, put those blinders on, and determine whether or not you are where you personally want to be. And if the answer is no, that just probably means that you're falling victim to some of those common mistakes that students make when they're studying, and you just need to develop a different approach using the tips that we've discussed in this video. But that's it for this one. If you found yourself victim to any of these pitfalls, know that you are not alone, but I hope that some of these strategies can help you in overcoming them. If you did learn something or found anything helpful in this video, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you feel like your main struggle is either focusing while you're studying or building consistency into your study routine, check out these two videos here for everything that you need on those two topics. But of course, until the next one, keep evolving, and I'll see you guys soon.